Story 1. My name is John, and I used to work the night shift at the Hillside Inn, a medium-sized hotel in the town of Clearwater. The main thing I did at my job was stand at the front counter and help customers check in or out. For the most part though, barely anyone came through the lobby at night. When they did, it would just walk by with a nod, so I mostly just stood there staring blankly at the front doors. I was used to getting the occasional angry or weird customer, but there was one night in particular that I'll never forget. It started out as a typical night. A big thunderstorm was raging outside, which meant I wasn't expecting to see many guests coming or going. I pulled out my phone to scroll endlessly, but after a few minutes a man I had never seen before came through the first set of entrance doors. He stopped in the small vestibule area between the two doors and looked around with darting eyes. We made brief eye contact before he awkwardly patted his pockets, turned around, and went back out into the storm. I thought it was odd, but working at a hotel you get used to strange behavior from strangers. I figured maybe he had forgotten his room key or something and needed to grab it from his car. I knew I hadn't seen him before, but that wasn't too unusual since most guests only came through the lobby to check in or out during the day. He also didn't have any luggage, so I assumed he already had a room upstairs and everything he needed. The phone rang a few minutes later. The caller ID showed an outside number. I answered with my usual greeting and asked how I could help. A man's voice was on the other end, explaining that he had parked out front and needed help bringing his luggage inside. I politely responded that I would be happy to help, but asked if he could pull his car up to the front door so I could help him without getting soaked. He hesitated a moment, but agreed that would be better. I figured he must have just wanted help holding his bags through the storm. We exchanged quick goodbyes and he hung up. I came around to the front of the desk to wait between the two entrance doors. After about 5 minutes, I was losing patience, so I cracked the door open and stuck my head out into the pouring rain. I could see the man from earlier across the parking lot, waving his arms and gesturing for me to come over. My stomach dropped. Why would he park so far just to make me walk all the way over there in this weather? I closed the door, making my way back over to the desk. If he really needed help with his bags, he could pull up to the covered entrance, like I had suggested. I had barely sat down when the man came bursting through the lobby doors, stopping wet. From how far into the lot he was, he must have sprinted over here. He stood a few feet from me, breathing heavily with an intense look in his eyes. He immediately repeated his request for me to help with his luggage. I calmly repeated that he should pull up to the covered front if he wanted help. This time, he claimed he had already taken his bags out of the car and didn't want to put them back in. My heart started racing. I asked if he had a room I could check him into first, just wanting some kind of verification before going outside alone with this increasingly suspicious stranger. He became visibly angry when I asked, practically yelling about how he shouldn't have to check him first. I've dealt with upset customers before, but something felt very off. I stood firm, responding a bit shortly that his bags were the ones getting rained on, and if he refused to check in, I would have to ask him to leave. He shot me a nasty glare, threw me the middle finger, and stormed back out into the night. I felt shaken up and kept watching the doors, worried he might try to force his way back in. When the morning shift came to relieve me, I told them to keep an eye out for the man. As far as I know, he never came back or got a room. I couldn't stop thinking about it. This random angry guy desperately tried to lure me outside alone into a dark, stormy night, and wouldn't take no for an answer. I was convinced he had sinister intentions, and still get chills thinking about what could have happened if I'd gone out there. Over the next week, I became paranoid working the night shift. I found myself triple checking the locks and compulsively watching the monitor showing the parking lot. Things finally started getting back to normal until one night, a week later, when I got another strange call around 2 a.m. This time a nervous-sounding woman asked if I could bring her a new set of towels. She was in room 209 and apologized for the late request, saying she had spilled wine on the ones in her room. I grabbed a sack of towels and brought them up, knocking lightly on 209. A few seconds went by before the door cracked open. It was very dark inside. A woman's hand darted out to grab the towels, then started pulling them into the room. I instinctively grabbed onto them too, alarmed by her behavior. She froze and peered out through the small opening. My heart sank as I recognized her. It was the angry man from the week before, only now wearing a long wig and women's clothes. Before I could react, he slammed the door shut. I sprinted back downstairs, locking myself in the back office and calling the police. I could hear him thundering down the stairs after me. He pounded aggressively on the office door, shouting that I had assaulted him, and he was going to sue. I shouted back that I had called the cops and he needed to leave immediately. The pounding stopped after a few minutes, so I assumed he took off. An officer arrived shortly after, and I explained the bizarre situation. He took down a description, but said there wasn't much to go on since the man hadn't technically broken any laws yet. He advised me to be cautious and call 911 if the man returned. For the next few weeks, I was a nervous wreck working nights. I scrutinized every guest, paranoid the creepy man would show up again. One night about a month later, a huge thunder and lightning storm hit around 3 a.m. The power cut out, and I grabbed the flashlight from behind the desk. Rain was coming down in sheets, and I could barely see the parking lot through the front doors. As I shined my flashlight towards the entrance, a huge bolt of lightning flashed outside. When my eyes adjusted, I could see the man's face pressed against the glass, staring in at me. I jumped back in shock, stumbling over a chair and crashing to the ground. When I looked up again, he was gone. My hands shook as I called 911 in a panic, reporting what I had seen. After an agonizing wait, 2 officers arrived to search the premises. They found no sign of him anywhere, though noticed prime marks on a few ground floor windows and back. The officers took my statement and said they would patrol more frequently at night. I was ready to quit after that, but decided to stick it out, hoping the man had finally given up. The rest of that year was uneventful, and I was finally able to relax at work again. Then one night I got trapped in the hotel's elevator on my way up to the 3rd floor. I pushed the emergency button and used the call box to report I was stuck between floors. Maintenance said they'd be there in 30 minutes after dealing with storm damage. As I sat waiting in the dark elevator, the lights suddenly flashed back on. The elevator jolted into motion, but instead of going back to the lobby, it started ascending. When it stopped, the doors opened onto the empty 9th floor. All the lights were off, and it looked deserted up there. Then I heard slow footsteps approaching from down the hall. Out of the darkness, the familiar face of the stalker emerged, holding some kind of small club. He had a deranged, wild-eyed look as he crept towards me. I panicked, frantically slamming my hand on buttons to try to get the doors to close. He broke into a sprint, raising the club above his head as he charged. Just as he reached me, the elevator doors slid shut. His weapon bounced off the metal doors with a loud bang as the elevator descended to the lobby. When the doors opened, the man stood waiting with an unsettling calm expression. I spotted a fire extinguisher on the wall and grabbed it, ready to defend myself. Suddenly, the lobby erupted into motion and noise as police swarmed in from every direction, ordering the man to get down on the ground. He had been spotted on security cameras entering the building illegally. He was finally arrested and charged with stalking and trespassing. I later found out he had become obsessed with me after being fired from his janitor job at the hotel months earlier for erratic behavior and violent threats. I was incredibly relieved to know he was locked away and the nightmare was finally over. I could never have imagined working the graveyard shift at a quiet hotel could put me face to face with such a dangerous predator. I'll certainly never look at night shifts the same way again.